Chapter 5. Conversations about the future and fears of death. Survival rates for cancers in Australia are amongst the best in the world. But even if the prognosis is very good, many people who are diagnosed with cancer worry about the possibility that they could die. Unsurprisingly, children wonder about this too. The question, "Are you going to die?" often causes distress in parents. It may be helpful to think about ways to reassure your children that they will always be cared for.
But I think one of the children had heard at school about someone whose mum had died of cancer, and then obviously they'd thought, oh my gosh, does that mean that mummy's going to die? And that was when the question came out.
I think that talking about death and dying is a very important thing. And I've worked with parents and I've always said that it's not something you just want to start over a dinner conversation or, riding in a car. It's an important conversation you need to have. You actually need to set aside time that you're going to talk to your children about this. You need to make that a very special time, a very considerate time. Set aside time where you're going to be with them and that, you're going to be with them the next day.
When asked with that question, it's quite confronting. But whenever I would go in, I'd set out a special time in the day and assign time in the day where I would have these conversations. So I was mentally prepared for these sort of questions. So my reaction and my responses would be very considered. So I was quite open to it. Of course, afterwards you'd go back in the room and cry your heart out. But as long as the child saw another view, then she'd have hope.
Before a parent can answer the question that a child asks them about when they're going to die, they need to be comfortable in themselves with their own mortality and have asked themselves questions about death. This is an opportunity to talk to children about a very scary idea, the idea that they won't be around to look after their children. It's therefore an opportunity to provide the children with reassurance that no matter what happens, they will always be looked after. Their needs will always be seen to. I also think it's important that children understand what we're saying about death at their own level. So for very small children, their sense of death is that it can be reversed, and I think cartoons have a lot to answer for in that respect. But slightly older children, say from the age of 6, do have an understanding that death is permanent, and they can be either quite scared about it or quite curious, or in fact both.
A lot of people would have experienced at some time in their life, someone who's died of cancer. And for children, they'll remember that, so-and-so had cancer and they died of cancer. So I think that even though you don't bring up that conversation with your children about dying and death, they're going to hear it from elsewhere, and they're going to make their own assumptions, they're going to make their own judgments about what's going to happen. So again, I always stress that everything is always better coming from the parents.
I think in the context of the great majority of cancers, however, parents need to be able to say that this is a possibility, but I don't think that's what's going to happen to me. I think the doctors are going to be able to fix me, but I can still get sad. I can still think about it. What do you think?
As time went on, one of them, I remember, asked me, "Are you going to die?" And I said, I'll die one day, but I don't think this will kill me. And the doctors don't think it will either. That was a hard question to answer.
Remember, talking about death is difficult. Talk to children about death rather than letting them make their own assumptions. Prepare and set aside time for this important conversation. Terms like passing away or going to sleep can be confusing. Try to use the words death or dying. If you're uncertain about what to say, a reassuring response is more helpful than not responding at all. For example, "The medical team isn't worried about me dying this week, month, anytime soon, but if anything changes, I will let you know." Or, At the moment, I don't know if I'm going to die, but the doctors are doing everything they can to make sure that doesn't happen.